My name is Lenard D. Moore. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I teach creative writing and African American literature at Mount Olive College, where I direct the literary festival and advise the literary magazine, The Trojan Voices. I've come to write what is, I believe, considered contemporary haiku, which does not adhere to the strict 5-7-5 syllables. Some of my haiku may have the 3-5-3 beats in them, but I do not, when I write haiku, just think about syllables. I think about trying to capture a moment in haiku and trying to say it or write it as concisely as possible, as vividly as possible, with hopefully good details and a haiku that I hope will expand within the reader's mind and allow the reader to participate in the experience of the haiku. I think that haiku has helped my longer forms of poetry that I write in that I'm able to employ an economy of words or write more concisely. I'm also able to have a precision of imagery in my poetry, which I think is important because I believe the reader looks for or hopes to experience a visual side of poetry and to be able to conjure what images I might be able to capture in my poetry. Also, in the African American church, it is very important to listen to the rhythms of the people, the rhythms of talking, preaching, ministering, the rhythms of the walk, and it's just so important. The rhythm, I think, is one of the most important aspects of the African American church. And I try to capture some of the rhythms in my poetry, particularly my longer forms of poetry, because I think cadence is so important when writing poetry. Of course, we know that Louis Alexander wrote haiku during the Harlem Renaissance, and so I would say that he is the father of African American haiku. And then there's Richard Wright, who wrote a tremendous amount of haiku. We know about his haiku because there's a collection of his haiku, This Other World, and I've enjoyed reading Richard Wright's haiku. Also, there's a study of his haiku that John Zen did. The book came out last year, and so I think that's a good collection of scholarly essays on Richard Wright's haiku, and hopefully it will help more people to appreciate Richard Wright's haiku and also to seek out his haiku to read it for themselves. And then, of course, there is Etheridge Knight, who wrote some really wonderful haiku, and there are about 7 of his haiku that are frequently anthologized. Sonia Sanchez has offered us new possibilities for examining haiku, especially the way that she infuses African American music, African American history into haiku, and hopefully scholars, students, and others will be able to appreciate haiku with new eyes. And further than that, I think it will bring an openness to haiku so that people will see haiku beyond the reaches of Japan and what is normally happening in haiku in English. So for that reason, I think one cannot look at haiku without examining Sonia Sanchez's haiku. It's very important. We must be aware of Richard Wright's haiku because what he did with haiku I think is remarkable. Richard Wright did not have the opportunity to study haiku for a long period of time or to actually be a part of the American haiku movement. He worked on haiku and wrote haiku basically himself, in isolation. And I think that's really good because he was on to something with haiku and the way that he was able to capture the natural world in his haiku, and also to incorporate a sense of identity in his haiku. I think that's really important to look at identity in Richard Wright's work. And also, he too, I think, brings another angle to haiku that I think would be important for anyone to examine. Poetry is a lifesaver. When I lost my daughter, Maisha LaShawn Moore, it was poetry that saved me. In fact, every evening I would write poetry about her. So I have a collection of poems that I need to organize in some way. That poetry helped to heal somewhat, I guess, with the grief process. So I'm hoping that I've written my way out of the grief that I experienced when I lost my daughter. And so without poetry, I don't know where I would be. So including haiku, as you know, one of my haiku that I wrote after losing my daughter, in fact, I experienced that moment at the burial. And my haiku is, hot afternoon, the squeak of my hands on my daughter's coffin. It was a really hot afternoon, and I don't know whether or not there was moisture in my hands, but I remember when I touched my daughter's coffin, I was the first one to place a rose on top of the coffin, and my hands squeaked as they went down the side of the coffin. And I remember that. That sound haunted me, so I had to write that poem down.